This is part 2 of Renaissance art. So let's take a look now at the Renaissance period. Themes were both religious and non-religious. The figures looked realistic, both nude and clothed, with special attention paid to the folds in the cloth. And there was a growing interest again in nature and how nature appeared, and another interest in the three-dimensional world as opposed to just the flat world of the Middle Ages, at least in art. And people showed emotion and were active. They were moving. So you can see the emotions on these figures. And they're moving around. They're lounging or running or engaging with each other. But how did the Renaissance artists make their paintings look so real? Probably the first thing that they started to master was linear perspective, which includes kind of two major things: horizon lines and vanishing points. So the first thing is the horizon line. If you have two trees here and a blank white space in the background, we can't really tell where they are in space. But if you add two colors, our eyes see the dividing line here as the horizon line. So all of a sudden we have kind of a foreground and a background. And so this is the horizon line right here. And so therefore we perceive the images having depth. And then if we add shadows, we also give the perception of depth. So this is making everything seem a lot more lifelike. And then we could change the placement of the trees, and again, more depth. And then if we place an object that's closer to us as bigger than an object that's farther away, again, even more perspective for depth. So size is an indicator of distance. Now let's do an example here. So here we have a very good example of linear perspective. We could see smaller images appear as though they're farther away. And then if you look at the ground here, you'll see these lines all oriented towards the center or towards the vanishing point. So artists started to experiment with this sort of stuff, and they even created paintings on purpose just to sort of examine this technique of linear perspective. So here we have the vanishing point, and then lines leading up to the vanishing point are called the orthogonals. And artists typically used orthogonals to guide their paintings. So you can see here this picture of a railroad track. There's a natural vanishing point here, somewhere right around here, and all lines kind of lead to that one point. So if you wanted to draw it, you could do the same thing with the railroad track to a vanishing point, and then all objects receding into the distance. So we'll go ahead and kind of skip through this. If you wanted to try this out, you could draw the same sort of picture that you saw before, the railroad track. And so the Renaissance artists begin to not only experiment with their perspective, but also with the type of paint being used. So before they had kind of this more, not quite as sophisticated palette of colors. And in the Renaissance, they started to experiment with different colors. It looked a lot more real. There's perspective, three-dimension, and new colors. Let's take a look at this painting right here. Again, religious themes, but very different than the Middle Ages. And they also started to paint daily life. And just to highlight these new techniques, before artists used kind of egg-based paint, which didn't allow a lot of experimentation in shading or layering of colors. But then artists moved towards oil-based paints, which were a lot more effective in creating depth and complexity of color. And artists started to paint a lot more frescoes on walls, and this is the famous Sistine Chapel ceiling by Michelangelo. And then the School of Athens by Raphael.